Hello everyone, thank you for joining me. I'm delighted today to be joined by Ossi Karala, the SVP of Sales and Customer Success from Spend Analytics Specialist Sievo. Ossi, welcome.
Thanks, good to meet you.
Yeah, okay, thank you for joining us. So this is the latest episode in our research into the software buying model for procurement and looking at how it's been broken and how it might need to change, particularly in the era of AI. So Ossi is, in a sales leadership role at Sievo, and perhaps you could tell us a little about your own background before we get started on the research, Ossi?
Yeah, sure. So yes, as Andrew mentioned, title is SVP, Sales and Customer Success here at Sievo. Name is Ossi. So basically, my function focuses on is everything from the first discussion we have with a potential customer to making sure that they are successful through the years and decades that they are with us here at Sievo. And Sievo as a company, hopefully many know us already, but we're the largest company specifically focusing on the topic of procurement analytics. So helping large enterprises find value from their procurement data. Often historically that's been more around traditional spend analytics. Now it's more and more about automatically identifying insights for our clients and then also not just analyzing our clients' data, but we have 2% of the world's GDP going through our systems every single year. So it's more about also benchmarking our clients against that anonymized data set and automatically identifying insights, helping our clients drive value and action from there. And I've been at Sievo for 10 years. 10 years, the company has been in business for 20 years. So that, of course, means that we have, myself and we as Sievo have seen a lot of different sort of software buying processes and different approaches of buying software, buying procurement analytics, running RFPs, running pilots, all of that. So looking forward to the discussion and sharing some of my thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you. And of course, Spend Analytics is probably the most high profile of what we would call the best of breed areas. It's an area which most procurement teams have to do something with their data and their insights. So you'll have seen, I'm sure, quite a wide range of buying behaviors as a sort of noted and respected best of breed. So how can procurement make the buying process more effective at both sides, particularly at RFP and pilot stage? And what do you see as a best of breed in that regard, Ossi?
Yeah, and I mean, as a sales leader, I could, of course, complain about the broken procurement process and it being slow and how it's broken and whatever. But kind of what I would actually say is that I get that there needs to be a procurement process. I get why that's in place, and I also get that the procurement function needs to kind of act as a model citizen for the rest of the organization and follow that buying process. So I wouldn't go as far to say as that the process itself is broken or wrong or anything like that. I think it's completely fine that that's in place there. I'd say, in my mind, the biggest win that could be achieved to make the process more efficient for both parties is actually just executing the process as it's designed better. And basically, my one message would be let the vendors help you also in figuring out what to evaluate. And kind of what I mean with that is that I often see companies trying to just recreate the scope of what do we need by themselves without talking that much to the vendors. So rather I'd say just executing the process as it's designed, having discovery calls with several different vendors to understand what's out there. Maybe you do an RFI to get an understanding of what's out there, and then based on that, building. You have your own needs, but you will probably learn things that you weren't even thinking about when having those discussions, and then build the scope based on that. And there will be some of your own needs, some of the needs that are or capabilities that you learn throughout. So I think that's in my mind the biggest thing. I think same goes then for example, executing pilots as well. So for the pilots, the vendors have usually been doing hundreds and thousands of pilots. So ask them what's the best way to test your solution, rather than trying to build that yourself. You will probably get 5 different answers, and then you can figure out what's the best way for yourself. But again, letting or having the input from the vendor side. Maybe as just a practical anecdote, for example, what we see quite often in pilots is that the buying companies are a bit too shy. So they might say that, hey, just take this small sliver of data and do the spend analytics on that. Yeah. But of course, if your success criteria is to is to test, for example, data cleansing. You want to test that on a wide data set, not something small, because you can run the process manually with a small data set as well. So kind of these sort of things, the vendors can help in figuring out what's the best way of testing and how you get the most out of that process.
So as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, because spend analytics is perhaps one of the most mature areas of tech investment for procurement teams, it sort of sounds like a little bit of a fixed mindset as this is what we've done. We've gone out to market to maybe replace what we've already got, whether it's been another solution or something they've built themselves. And I know that's a factor in what you do from our previous conversation. So it's a fixed mindset. So really that you'd encourage them to have a much more upfront conversations early on to explore what's possible, what's coming in your product roadmap, for example, but also the scope of those pilots.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not saying that everyone is doing it with a fixed mindset. I've seen some teams do this extremely well, where they really have great discovery discussions with, it's not just with us, with the different providers they are evaluating, and they get a lot of great input from that. So yeah, exactly as you said. And I think that also builds a much better relationship with both the kind of the selected vendor, but also the ones that you don't end up selecting, because everyone feels that, hey, we got to tell our view of this, and we got to tell our story, and we were considered. So yeah, exactly.
So more upfront conversations, it would be a big win, certainly. And then what about once you get into the actual tender and evaluation selection process? Any sort of things you think that could be done better in that part of the process?
Yeah, I think there's some small tweaks, I think, from both the sell and buy side. So I think there's very obvious ones, like of course just using common sense on what to ask and when. So if let's say you are releasing an RFP for 10 and having 10 different companies participate, you probably shouldn't be asking for contract comments on the first round, but rather ask them at the later rounds. And I think the same goes for any questionnaires when you're running your tender. And in general, think through what's needed for which decision point, and then in my mind, as long as you give a heads up to the vendors of what's required from them at what point, they can prepare their resources and even give very quick turnarounds for many things, and you can kind of expect that. But rather, let's ask things when we need them, and not everything up front just in case. And then I think from the vendor side, I think one thing that we as vendors could be much better at in the tenders, but also in the sales processes in general, is making sure that our sales and account management teams are capable of kind of pushing for the best practice and sharing our view on how things should be done. So not just reading through it, okay, these are the requirements, but actually sharing our thoughts of how things should be done. We've seen thousands of these situations before, so I think we should be sharing our thoughts. And I think that's also something that when procurement teams are evaluating vendors, I'm hoping that they are focusing on that. Like, if the vendor isn't pushing back at all at any points, they will probably also not be sharing their best practices during the implementation journey either. So,
and a procurement team is becoming more open to that part of the conversation. Do you think, is that a trend? Is it trending in the right direction?
Yeah, I would say so. And I think teams are realizing that there's a lot of value in being open and trying to understand what's out there, what's possible, and asking for best practice. So definitely, I'm seeing some good movement on that front.
And I know in your market in particular, sort of DIY systems from that have been built in house are a common thing you encounter when you're being asked to consider as an alternative, or of course you might be potentially replacing a competitor or a spend analytics capability in a broader platform. So when you're potentially replacing an incumbent, whether it be another solution provider or a DIY system, how do you spot early on if the process is genuine and could result in a good possible outcome, or actually it's a bit of a waste of time, quite frankly, because it's just a tire kicking exercise?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I don't think there's one perfect answer for this. I also think that being from the sales side, we need to kind of acknowledge the fact that no decision will probably always be the thing we lose to most. So right. that's just a part of the game that there we have discussions. Sometimes those lead to lead to no change, and that's completely fine, and that's kind of understandable. And I think the thing we need to make sure on the sales side is just that we try to help our counterparts on the buy side make the best possible case for the change. Yeah. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So yeah, that's how I think of it. Also, maybe for the buy side, I think there's many people in the procurement teams and in the procurement excellence teams trying to drive change and trying to change things. So I think for those people also, my view is that most processes are generally open to be changed if there is some sort of a pain that we're trying to solve. Sometimes it takes 6 months, sometimes it takes 3 or 5 years to get that change through. But in general, I feel that there is openness to change, to improve systems. Sometimes it takes longer, sometimes it's faster, and it of course needs quite a lot of pushing also from the teams internally sometimes to make the case for that change. Now, of course, if you're trying to replace your ERP, it might be a bit more challenging, but like big picture, I would say it like that.
And sometimes I've had this conversation with a few of the leaders recently in this whole research about no decision, and you look back and think that was a complete waste of our time, and really it was just an exercise in getting the incumbent down on price. That's a huge waste of resources on your side, a questionable use of resources on the buy side. Is that something we just really need to stop now and start having much more open conversations?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a great point. There are definitely cases where it's just there's an RFP and it's just about just trying to get the sense of the market where the price is, or trying to push your current vendor on price. I think there are much more efficient ways of getting that information than launching a 100-page RFP. So you can probably just call us and we have a discussion on where the market pricing is. So there's no need to waste huge amount of time from 10 different companies to get that sort of information. And yeah, you talked about the transparency. In my mind, I think the ask from most sales professionals would be that our job is to help you drive that change. So let's just have a transparent, trust-based relationship and understand where you are. So if you're trying to drive change within the organization, you don't have budget, you don't have executive buy-in, that's fine. We can try and help you get there. But if you're trying to, if you don't have any of that buy-in and then you're trying to negotiate price with us when we should be really focused on how do we get this change done, that just doesn't make any sense.
Indeed. And so in that circumstance you talk about there, you've not actually got buy-in yet, you've not got a budget yet. Is that when pilots really can prove their true value?
Yeah, I think that's one place where pilots can definitely help. So in my mind, pilots are a good way of building the business case for the solution. I don't think it's the immediate cure. So there needs to be some sort of interest within the organization to at least be willing to explore and have some sort of commitment that, okay, let's pilot and let's be open to the end result of this pilot. If there is that sort of openness, then I think pilots are definitely a great way to build interest, build business case, build buy-in within the organization for how this solution could potentially solve the problem.
Yeah, indeed. And you mentioned previously when you touched on parts about data cleansing, you gave an example about when they just give you a small part of the data, and that's not necessarily the best way to approach that. So what sort of characteristics do you look for in a really successful pilot that will ultimately drive adoption and successful change? What are the key sort of criteria there?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we've actually, I think, written even some sort of a blog post or article on this topic as well. Couple of different things. Number one, clear success criteria. So if we are doing a pilot, we need to be clear about what's the problem that we are solving, and then we need to test for that problem. So very clear, why are we doing this pilot? What are we trying to prove? Are we trying to, let's say in our case, our example, are we trying to test for how good we are in classification? Are we trying to test for how we can identify insights in the data, or are we trying to build a business case or something like that? So very clear success criteria and testing against those. Then I think it's also very, this is more from a change management perspective, but very important to communicate also internally properly about what it is that's kind of comparable to full capability in the solution, and what's not full capability yet. So
Right.
kind of what are the things we're testing? So if you have many people going into the solution and they think that everything should be perfect, no, it's a pilot. It's got a focus area, and there are some things that we're testing. Some areas are not comparable to a full solution yet. So that's, I think, important from a change management perspective. And then I think the third thing, we kind of touched on it, is that a great pilot helps in building internal buy-in through the business case that we can build, and then also through there being active people that are testing it, that gain value from it, and that can then help in the internal change management when we launch the full solution, saying that, hey, I tested this in the pilot, I found X million in savings, it's really useful, you should try it as well, and you kind of get these sort of internal champions and fans of the solution that way.
Indeed. And we've been talking over 15 minutes now, Ossi, and I've not mentioned AI yet. So that's remiss of me. So my apologies to yours as well. So are you getting asked specifically about pilots using AI in your solution yet? Are people actually asking you to say, what are you doing with AI?
Yes, we get the question of what do you do with AI? I think AI is also inherently part of basically any success criteria that we are we have for a pilot that we do. In my mind, a pilot should never be about what do you do with AI, but there should be actually some sort of problem that you're solving. So, for example, if you are trying to solve the classification problem, AI has a very big part in that. Or if you're trying to solve a problem of being able to more easily identify insights from the data, AI again plays a role in that. Or if it's about how do you interact with your data, again, AI is a great way of interacting with data. So it's in my mind, a tool that can help in solving those sort of problems and in a more efficient way.
Yeah, and with it evolving so quickly at a frightening pace, quite frankly, if we talk about sales cycles, which in your case I think can be 6 months plus, I know some of the source to pay and other orchestration, whatever, can be 9, 12 months plus. How does procurement need to adapt if you're starting an evaluation process today? You might not make a decision for 6 or 9 months yet. In that time, the AI has changed beyond recognition. What's procurement got to do to keep pace with that, I think, in terms of its buying process moving forward?
Yeah, well, I think one part you already kind of mentioned there. So, of course, speed is important. So if you have an 18-month buying process, the solution will probably look quite different after 18 months. So you need to just acknowledge that when you're going through that process, that these systems develop constantly and new stuff coming, all of that. Then I think an interesting question is how to best evaluate the capability of the vendor to deliver innovation and deliver new AI capabilities and overall deliver new software capabilities, because that's a part of SaaS. We're not selling you a solution of what it is now, but also how it will develop over the next years. And I think for this, actually, there was a great tip from a customer of ours at Sievo Friends, so our latest customer event in Chicago. And they had a point that of course everyone has roadmaps, and you should ask for the roadmap of the companies you are evaluating. But I think you shouldn't necessarily read it as, okay, this is what's coming on date X and all of that, but rather look at the roadmap as, is this company going into the direction that I would want them to go towards? But then for actually evaluating how capable they are of delivering innovation, I would say it's better, and this was the point from our customer as well, it's better to ask for what they delivered in the last 12 months. Right. Because that actually proves what their capability to innovate. And companies have very different, let's say, ambition level and realism level in their roadmaps and how they're capable of delivering the roadmap. So I think it's important to not just look at the forward-looking part, but also look at what has actually been delivered to date over the last 12 months, for example.
Indeed. And just stay on the subject of AI, how many people are raising issues around trust, compliance, governance with such important subjects as data? Is that something which you're, again, having a lot of conversations with now about what's coming down the track for existing customers and prospects?
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, we sell to the largest of companies out there, and we have always needed to go through different sort of InfoSec approvals and all of that. But now, of course, these AI policies of companies and that's something that every company is looking at more carefully. Mm-hmm. So I think that's just part of being in the business of procurement analytics and of analytics and data in general, that we we have those discussions. Those are important discussions to have and to make sure that everyone is aware of how AI is being used in the solution, how data is in general being processed, and all of that. So it's not something I see as a issue or a problem. It's just a discussion that needs to be had, and I completely understand that companies need to have kind of governance processes around AI.
I think a lot of the conversation I've been involved in this sort of autumn event season, and also follow up after events in particular, has been the big issues around trust, governance, compliance. A lot of people thinking very, very careful about that, and that's in a way at the moment a little bit of a barrier to progress in terms of getting started on AI. But that's something which I think procurement leaders and the people, the resources they've got in their organisations, that's a big focus. And of course, you've got developing legislation as well, and it's different in the States, it's different in the EU. You've obviously got a big European presence, you've got a strong presence in the States. So I suppose there's a lot for you to juggle with moving forward as well as that landscape evolves.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a great point. I think companies are more and more realizing that they need to do something with AI. So we're more and more going from thinking of it purely from a compliance perspective to thinking of it, how do we make this work, and how do we keep the data security and ensure that we are covered on that front, but that we are gaining the value also, because if you just say no to all of the new innovation, you are going to get left behind quite quickly. And I feel that's what we are seeing with most of our customers also, that they have the drive to do new things. They need to go through the hoops to kind of address all of those topics. But yeah, sometimes it slows down things. I think the best companies are finding a way and kind of moving forward as well.
And we've got AI sourcing tools, we've got AI negotiation on both sides of the equation now. What's the buying process going to look like in 12, 18 months? I'll see any ideas. I mean, it's a difficult thing. I'll put you on the spot there a little bit, but how's the process? Do you think the process will speed up because of AI? Will it become more efficient? Do you feel that's a win for both sides with less resources deployed on in both parts of the discussion?
I think there definitely is a lot of efficiency that can be gained. Obviously, it depends really a lot on what sort of solutions we're talking about. What are we buying? All of that. There are already now negobots that can autonomously negotiate certain purchases. Probably not software as the first category, but anyways, I think and I hope that it will make the buying process also more, or buying and selling process more efficient. So already now we are using an AI solution to populate answers to the RFPs that we get. It's like it's amazing. It's super efficient. We have our documentation. We see the questions. AI fills in the answer, and then we validate that. And I hope that more and more these sort of things can make it efficient to cover the needs. Hopefully, it will also evolve the process so that we don't just do the same process with better tools, but that we will actually rethink also that what's the best way of going through the whole evaluation process.
It really has to. I think that one of the things that we've been looking at in terms of the skills discussion around for procurement professionals in the AI era is around what we call adaptive intelligence, that ability to unlearn old ways of doing things, old ways of thinking, and learn new ways, and not necessarily, in terms when it comes to processes and digital, not just trying to fit solutions to outdated processes, but starting a blank sheet of paper and really rethinking things. And that mindset, I think, is going to be difficult for a lot of people to embrace. But once they do get to that point, it'll be quite liberating, really, to be able to start designing for the tools that can deliver huge value, rather than trying to retrofit, SaaS solutions and dated processes. So I think that's a fascinating landscape for procurement in particular. The other one that I think is really interesting, has got a lot of conversation at the moment, is the charging model. So a lot of the sort of source to pay platforms charge on per seat models. How do you charge at Sievo typically?
Yeah, so it's a spend-based pricing model for us. But yeah, I see seat-based and spend-based are probably the most common models in procurement technology tools.
Yeah. So you've got spend-based, but I mean, have you heard or had any conversation about usage-based or complexity or value-based pricing models yet, or do you think that's still to come in the future?
Yeah, I think I can answer this from both our perspective, like us as a business, and then in general as well, what I'm hearing kind of from software and elsewhere. I think value-based is something that is, of course, very common in consulting and BPO, for example, where it's very clear that there is a team that's working on a problem and they gain some savings, and then you get a share of those savings. It's very kind of direct linked. For software, for us, we sometimes get questions about, could we do a value-based model? What I'm hearing also from other software companies is that it's something that sounds nice in theory initially before you have proven the value of the solution, but then quite often when you get to the part of actually delivering the value for the buy side, at that point it comes quite quickly that, hey, maybe we want to have this kind of fixed cost subscription model rather than a value-based model when you actually start delivering the value, because of course it's more predictable that way. But I mean, I think for us also, the more and more we get into kind of very directly linking the actions that you're, for example, doing from the insights you identify in Sievo, there is in a way a possibility of more directly linking also to value. But I don't see that happening very immediately. Then when it comes to usage-based, I haven't heard that much in our industry about that. I think it's, of course, quite common in, for example, data pipelines, APIs, these sort of places. So it's used, but maybe in a bit different domains often.
I've heard lots of different perspectives, and the hybrid modeling as well, because it gives you a degree of predictability, but also some linking into usage complexity or value. I think it's going to be a while till we get a transition there with so many different perspectives. I'm not sure I don't think there's any consensus yet as to what the model is going to look like, but I think it'll take a shift in mindset from procurement away from that predictability you talk about, but also a shift in mindset from some of the software companies. But I think some of the AI native businesses are really leaning into that, but I'm not sure procurement's quite ready for it in a lot of cases yet. But that's going to be a fascinating landscape to observe, and it'd be interesting to see if that gets built into processes where companies are actually exploring different ones with different vendors. That'll be an interesting sort of situation to observe as we move forward.
So exactly. Maybe one main point to mention there, as you said, hybrid models are also possible. So I think there is a need from procurement to bring some sort of predictability to the costs, and some of these models have less predictability. So there's a potential of more hybrid models where there's some predictability built in, for example, through certain commitments that you make on volumes or whatever it be, and then have it a bit of a hybrid.
I'm sure that's something you'll be discussing internally in the sales moving forward. So, I mean, from my perspective, obviously, that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover. I really appreciate your insights. That's been fascinating to hear from somebody who's 10 years with one of the most respected best of breeds in Europe in particular, and of course the strongest in the States. So, moving forward, if anybody wanted to sort of investigate what Sievo can bring to the organisation, discuss any of the topics we've touched on today, what's the best way to contact you personally?
I think LinkedIn is the easiest, or then just email, first name, last name @sievo.com is the email. But LinkedIn is probably the easiest way to reach out.
Yeah, indeed. Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time. And from my perspective, I hope you've enjoyed that for our audience. I think it's some really good insights as part of this wider research we're conducting, and the report will follow later on this year to cover all the different interviews we've done, some of which are live, like Ossi's been brave enough to come on camera. Others have been trying to do it confidentially, but we'll be sharing all those insights in due course. But if it's resonated with you in terms of the skills we've touched on for AI, or the hiring, if you're looking to hire into specific data analytics capability roles, we've been working on some of those recently as well. So, of course, get me. Everyone knows I pretty much live on LinkedIn these days, so you can get me that way. But thanks for your time. Really appreciate you watching. And Ossi, thanks again. Yeah, I really appreciate your insights.
Great. Thanks, Andrew.